Okay. So I'm Jefferson Boye Knight, a member of the United Methodist Church in the West Africa Regional Conference, um, and I serve as the program director of the Human Rights Office of the Liberia Annual Conference, the United Methodist Church, and also a climate justice activist, as well as a developmental specialist who is involved in grassroots development in poor communities around the West Africa region. I'm excited to form, I'm also a member of the United Methodist Climate Justice Movement that is organizing a one day conference on climate change and climate justice for the Council of Bishops. And I also participated in the rewriting of the social principles, especially in the area of environmental justice and sustainability. So I'm And also, I am an earth keeper trained by the General Board of Global Ministries of the United Methodist Church, and I'm so excited and passionate to present on the stewardship of God's creation, especially when it comes to climate justice, for our Episcopal leadership for the climate justice and plenary healing program that is coming up. Here we go. I would like for us to look at the theological mandate, but before we look at the theological mandate of uh, the earth that God has given us according to Psalm 24, verse 1, I want to share that growing up as a kid in Liberia, especially in Africa, because it's not just only in Liberia and Sierra Leone, Guinea, Cote d'Ivoire, because the war took us around, our war, civil war, over 14 to 15 years, took us to different countries. And growing up as a kid, I saw how my grandparents worked on farms. They made farm. They were agriculturists, and they were farmers, local farmers, I would say, because they were not involved into industrial agricultural program. They were just involved in subsistence farming. And I saw the rivers in the back of our yard in central Liberia, specifically in Banga, Bon County. I saw the rivers as young people. We went to those rivers and swam during the day and caught fish from the river. But after um, 20 years after, to 25 years after, 20 to 25 years, when I went back in that village, the rivers were almost gone. And I was shocked. And then I remember, as a climate justice and human rights advocate, that hey, these are some of the consequences of the climate change that is that has engulfed the world and creating harm for mankind based on the activities of mankind, based on our own activities. So the drought issue, drought, rivers are getting dry, creeks are getting dry, the issue of erosion and all the different things I saw, deforestation, those forest areas that we went for wood, we went to cut down woods for cooking purposes and for energy to cook our food. Some of those forests were no more around. I walked practically for like 2, 3 hours and I just saw savanna grass. I could not see the trees, I could not see the logs and what have you. And that was devastating for me. I knew that we need to take action and we must act now. And those are some of the things that inspire me. Then in Monrovia, because we moved down to Monrovia from central Liberia, and in Monrovia, along the sea, the coastal area, the sea, and where we have the Atlantic Ocean, communities along the Atlantic Ocean have been wiped out. Like, for example, the West Point is a densely populated community with over 100,000 inhabitants. It's wiped out. It's closing in. It's been submerged by the Atlantic Ocean because of climate change. We have another area in the Cinco Belt in Monrovia. Um, it's also been threatened. It's been threatened by the Atlantic Ocean because of climate change. Just 2 weeks ago in Ghana, Accra, Ghana, the Republic of Ghana, there was massive erosion. I mean, flooding, sorry, flooding that destroyed thousands of homes, and some deaths were reported. In other parts of the world, we're seeing the impact in Fiji and other places. Those islands have been wiped out by the consequential uh, ravaging of climate change. Now, as a church, how do we engage? What do we do in terms of addressing these issues? What do we do in addressing these issues? So I would like for us to look at the theological mandate that God has given us as a church. It's not just for us to enjoy the beauty and live happily, but then leave the responsibility to the next generations that are innocent and don't know exactly what is happening. I think this generation should act now, including our Episcopal bishop. That's why in the book of Psalms, Psalm 24, verse 1, it says, "The earth is the Lord's and all that is in it, the world and those who live in it." We need to become responsible citizens of the earth that will protect, defend, and nurture the earth for this generation and generations to come. Let us look at the mandate, the Genesis mandate versus the human abuse. The sacred covenant in Genesis chapter 2, verse 15 is clear when it comes to our role and responsibility when it comes to climate change. God placed humanity in the garden to till and keep it, to guard, protect, preserve. And that has to do with dominion. He said dominion, dominion was never a lesson for rampant exploitation. It was never a lesson for rampant exploitation, like what is happening today. But it was a holy responsibility of servant stewardship. So you see, some scientists and other friends from the other side will argue that God has given us the earth for us to replenish, to have dominion and use it anyhow. Because God who made it, God can fix it. That has been some of the arguments in other quarters. But we have stood up against those kinds of erroneous arguments that dominionship doesn't mean rampant exploitation and destruction. It means a holy responsibility of servanthood or servant stewardship. It means protecting the earth. It means taking good care of God's earth that He has given us. It doesn't mean that we should destroy it. That's what Genesis is saying here to us. So, what do we do? Let us look at the broken harmony. Human greed. What has been the problem? Based on the different arguments that have come, human greed over industrialization and unchecked consumption had desecrated God's gift because of our greed, especially the issue that has to do with industrialization, the industrialization era. Fossil fuels were used massively for developmental purposes and what have you. And unchecked consumption happened. It has desecrated the good gift that God has given on the earth. Today, there are lots of consequences going on, especially the least countries with the least emission of greenhouse gas, continue to feel the brunt of this greed for money, of this greed for power. Unbraided burning of fossil fuels disrupt the delicate balance of Earth's natural systems. And that's why we are seeing today. That is why we are getting the effect. That is why we are feeling the consequences of this unbalanced breed of activities by humankind. Destruction of the ecosystem is a spiritual crisis, a violation of our covenant with the Creator, and a sin against the future generation. Now, what is happening? It's a complete violation. The destruction of the ecosystem is a spiritual crisis that we are faced with. It is not about profit making, it is not about satisfying one group of people. We saw exactly what happened during the slaves transatlantic slave trade, the colonial period, when other continents were partitioned, but those who consider themselves as powerful. Today, the same thing is happening in the area of climate change. Rich nations, those who are in the industrial fossil fuel, are not willing to let go because of the profit that they getting from it. The mass profit, the wealth. And the irony of this whole thing is rich nations today got developed by using fossil fuel. They developed those nations by means of fossil fuel. So the contention has been, what about those developing countries? Developed nations are developed because of fossil fuels. That has been one argument. And developing nations also want to get developed and lift people from poverty, and they want to continue using fossil fuel. But the usage of fossil fuel, has greater impact, consequences when it comes to destruction of the earth. So what do we do? What do we do in such instance? It destroys the ecosystem, like we said, and it has created a spiritual crisis, a violation of our covenant with God, our Creator. People argue, other advocates from around the continent of Africa and other places have argued that climate climate financing is the way out, so that developed countries can provide financial support, transferring the technology to those poor countries that do not have meaningful impact, that do not have meaningful um, activities, role play when it comes to the destruction of the earth. And the argument is still on, and deliberations are still on. Let us look at the scientific reality of global warming. Unprecedented crisis. Sorry. An unprecedented crisis. Sorry. Anthropogenic emissions of greenhouse gases, CO2, methane, have brought global temperatures to historical highs. We're feeling it everywhere. We're feeling it everywhere. But those that continue to suffer the most are those who are considered as the innocent countries that continue to bear the brunt of climate change around the world because they do not have the technology, they do not have the finances. Like, for example, I was in southeastern Liberia 2 weeks ago in the port city of Sino County. about 200 miles away from Monrovia. It's a coastal area, and I witnessed firsthand the destruction of the entire coastal community by the sea. The government of Liberia has been fighting to to add defenses by bringing rocks from the mountains, from the hills, as a protective shield against the erosion, the sea erosion. But the government doesn't have the capital, doesn't have the money. When government have our government have competing priorities. Healthcare is weighing the national budget down. Uh, National security, education continue to weigh the government. And then at the same time, we are grappling with crisis, climate issues, climate change issues. That is why our church, our leaders, our bishops need to stand with us, need to stand with other ecumenical partners and other faith leaders around the world to hold countries responsible for the climate change situation crisis that we face with accountable. They need to be held accountable. They need to be held accountable. Extreme heat waves, prolonged droughts, catastrophic rainfall, and severe biodiversity loss are accelerating every day. And some of the things, one of the things that the good thing or uniqueness of Liberia is that Liberia holds about 40 to 45% of the Guinea Reef rainforest, which is a huge benefit to the world when it comes to biodiversity and the ecosystem. So, what do we do in terms of protecting that forest and other forests around the world, biodiversities, to help with the acceleration of, 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 of protecting the atmosphere? We know that our church and our leaders, especially our bishops, have the prophetic voice to advocate for change, to hold governments accountable, especially responsible governments. Scientific Scientific consensus emphasizes that the window for meaningful climate mitigation is closing rapidly. It's closing in. If nothing is done speedily, who knows? 5 years from now, what will be the consequences? Drought, storm. 3 months ago in central Liberia and the western part of the country, there were huge storms that de-roofed homes and made our people displaced. There were over 5,000, I think 5 to 7,000 people made displaced as a result of de-roofing of their homes and heavy rainstorms. These are innocent souls that have nothing to do with climate crisis. They have nothing to do with the climate crisis. These are poor farmers who are minding their own business. Or let us look at also the moral paradox, the disproportionate burden. And what does that mean? 10% of emissions from vulnerable nations. And I know most of our bishops and church leaders know about this. The core climate injustice. When 10% of emission of greenhouse gases come from vulnerable nations, developing countries, developing countries contribute less than 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Yet, they experience over 80% of severe climate casualties, crop failure, and economic displacement. Those who contributed the least to global warming are forced to pay the highest price, suffering catastrophic loss of life, livelihoods, and ancestral homelands. Are we going to wait and serve as spectators while this gift that God has given us diminished or is destroyed? Are we going to wait? Are we going to wait? The climate justice and the global south, front lines of destruction. In developing nations across Africa, Asia, and the Pacific, climate change is not a future threat. It is a daily catastrophe. Rising sea levels submerge coastal communities, like what I said, while erratic monsoons destroy vital agriculture. As leader of a global connectional church, our bishops must elevate the voices of frontline Methodists who face displacement, starvation, and environmental racism. It is time for our bishop to stand up and join United Methodists and other people of faith to act now in mitigating this challenge or these challenges. The pillar of global climate action. We'll be looking at four pillars, and three or four. We'll be looking at the climate financing, technology transfer. What are those actions needed to help or to mitigate the climate crisis or the climate change consequences that we're faced with today? Different climate conferences around the world organized by the UN, like the last one. I attended the Paris 2015 COP21 conference in Paris, and that is where we talk about the loss and damage, reparation, and financing, climate financing, and what have you, and the reduction of greenhouse gas by, the temperature to, I think, 1.5 Celsius. Have we achieved those? Let's look at what we have as part of our presentation. Climate financing. High emitting developed nations must fulfill commitments to international climate funds to support mitigation and adaptation in low income countries. Technology transfer, equitable sharing of green technology, renewable energy systems, and resilient agricultural tools to accelerate sustainable development globally. Loss and damage, providing direct compensation and humanitarian support to vulnerable communities experiencing irreversible climate loss and forced migration. The voice of the church. The voice of the church. Our covenant with God calls us to steward, protect, and defend God's creation and to advocate for policies rooted in justice and sustainability. That is the phrase I took from the Methodist Book of Resolution 1033. That is, it is an agreement, it is a covenant with God, cause to steward, to provide adequate stewardship and protect and defend God's creation. And I agree with this 100%. The global responsibility gap. We all know, most of us, if not all, most of us have read, we've heard about the historical greenhouse gas emissions, where it has come from, and all the different things, who are responsible for it based on greed, based on profit making, and all the different things. So I'd like for us to look at quickly the global responsibility gap. The historical greenhouse gas emission, about 70% of cumulative global CO2 comes from developed nations, about 70%. And 30% of cumulative gas, um, cumulative comes from, CO2 comes from developing nations. So you see the gap, 70-30. What are the primary drivers? In nations, industrialization and high consumption has been a drive. In developing countries, subsistence living, emerging markets, subsistence farming and thing. So you look at the gap, vulnerability and impact. Let's look at that. High adaptive and financial capacity developed nations have. They can adapt quickly because they have the technology, they have the capital. Look at poor countries or developing countries. Severe droughts, floods, famine, sea rise, etc., etc. Look at the gap. Look at it. Let us look at it in ethical imperative. Mandate for funding and rapid transition in developed countries. They have that. They have the mandate. They have the resources. They can transition. For example, fire disaster and what have you. Let's look at developing country. Urgent need the climate finance and technology. It's time to act. It is time for us to act. UMC roadmap for climate action. These are proposals. Annual audits. We're calling for annual audits. Conferences and local churches conduct campus carbon audits and reduction plans. Reduction plan. Net zero 2050. All general agencies and episcopal areas to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emission by 2050. Are we? Can we achieve that? Can we? And then we saw the 2024 mandate from the General Conference to adopt, which adopted the revised social principles and the Green New Deal resolution. Global advocacy. UMC congregation should bear witness at UN COP climate negotiations for climate financing. The church, the UMC bishops, our bishops should attend the UN climate conferences. It should not just be members or pastors. Our leaders should be well represented at those international gatherings to push, to advocate for climate financing, especially to developing countries that continue to feel the brunt of climate impact. Call to action for United Methodist Bishop, our bishop, call to actions. What do we do to help protect and defend Mother Earth as as our as our bishops and episcopal leaders? Pastoral preaching and teaching, we should be able to proclaim creation care as an essential element of the Wesleyan holy living and discipleship. Oh, sorry. Holy living and disciple making across all annual conferences. Let me repeat that because I have some glitches. Proclaim creation care as an essential element of Wesleyan holy living and discipline making across all annual conferences. The second action, conference infrastructure. Annual conferences should appoint caretakers of God's creation coordinators in every episcopal area and implement local carbon footprint audits and other activities. Civic and policy advocacy. That's the third action that we need to take. Use episcopal moral authority to pressure governments and other institutions, including businesses, for full funding of international climate aid and just energy transfer or transitions. And then the fourth action that we have here is solidarity and divestment. Align conference investment with green energy and work in direct partnership with climate impacted sisters and brothers in the global south. The issue that has to do with moving away from fossil fuels and replacing it with green energy with support, financial support, technological support that will protect the earth and keep it safe for us and the next generation. For such a time as this, will we answer God's call to defend Mother Earth and uphold climate justice? Will we? That is a moral question. Let us lead the flock of Jesus Christ in healing, creation, and loving our global neighbors. Thank you, and God bless you.